Swift enums are really powerful, that's something we already know. But there is one thing that it's always been annoying, and it's the fact that you cannot have default parameters on the associated values of an enum case. Well, that's fixed with Swift 5.1, so let's take a look. Let's quickly write an enum that has, first of all, a normal case. There is no associated values here, there is nothing special about it, and to see how it looks, let's try to print it. And we can see that we are just printing this case. Swift enums are really powerful and they can have associated values. Let's, for example, attach an integer to this case. This means that now every time you want to treat this case of this enum, you actually need to pass a specific value to it. It's associated with this case. Here we see that it's printed as we expect. This is an issue sometimes when you want to design an API that uses enums because they are really nice to use in Swift. But then sometimes you just want to have a default case that the user doesn't have to specify all the associated values of the enum. And up until now that was not possible. What you can do now is say case with default, for example, and you can say int as before, but you can actually pass a 0 here as if you did it in a function definition. Now, when you are going to use this, you can actually pass 10 as before with values, that's not different, but you can also leave this empty and the default value kicks in and it's what it's used. And as you can see here, we have this. Now, one small issue I found with this, that you need to be a little careful about it, is the fact that you can actually write this default and that's it. And this may be similar to this scenario and you may think, well, if I'm not passing any value here, any parameter, I could just treat it as a case with no associated values. And that's not right, because if we run that, you will see that it's referencing the function that creates the enum value. We actually need to call the function that creates the enum value. It's like an enum constructor, basically, that creates this enum value. And that's what has this functionality of giving us the default parameter. So never forget to pass this, otherwise you're not dealing with an enum, like in this case, you are dealing with a function that will give you an enum, which is useful for some other things, but not for this case. Now the interesting thing is that, as far as I know, this has been accepted on Swift Evolution for years. This was proposed at around Swift 3, and it was not really proposed this specifically, but it was the fact that before enums with associated values were using on the Swift implementation tuples. And that caused many quirks that the Swift team wanted to solve. Then they started moving, defining Swift enums with the same syntax and the same implementation behind the scenes that it's used for things like a function, which that gave us the ability to write an enum case that can have associated values that are named, in the same way that functions can have that. But for one reason or another, they never finished the complete refactor of this implementation detail on Swift. We didn't have the ability to actually specify default values, something that you were able to do on function definitions. Now these two worlds are brought together and you can think of a case absolutely as the same thing as a function that returns you a specific case of the enum. To show you that there was kind of a workaround about this before that, I'm going to show you a specific concrete example of the code base I work every day with, and something that I found that I needed to do in many times, but this is just one example. Here we have an enum that tells basically our component system to automatically scale some components based on accessibility multipliers. Sometimes the default accessibility settings on an iOS don't fit our purposes, so we need to tweak some of the dynamic components that we render on the UI to automatically scale based on a multiplier that we have tweaked to make it work properly. It's not a super nice thing, but it's hidden enough in our framework that it's not a really big deal. So here the first case is none. In this case, what it means is that the height, it's not going to be manually scaled with any multiplier. It's just going to respect the height of the component, which means that usually the component is dynamic and it works well enough. It already handles accessibility on its own. For other components that can't do that because they are too complex or for whatever reason, we actually have another case that we pass a specific multiplier that we take from the font scale settings on the system, and then our framework takes care of scaling that manually. So here, for many things, we already have one value that works mostly okay for many things, and in case we forget about this specific functionality, make it accessible, we want this to work properly. It will be good to have a default value here, but that was not possible. So one of the things that you could do is use a static let property that actually just returns and creates one case with the value that you want. This is something I commented on the previous video, that like static lets, on that case it was on structs, gave you the same syntax as an enum will give you. This that syntax, and you can even omit the type if the type is inferred by the compiler. So here I can just say default. You see that it's actually just giving the multiplier with the default value. We could change this actually now and just say here 0.9. And actually, I'm not sure that's the best thing in some scenarios, because now you want to say, yeah, I'm using the multiplier and it's using the default, and that's fine. But maybe from an API perspective, it was actually nice to have, I don't care if it's none, if it's multiplier, or if it's something new that I don't know yet, just use the default and make it work. So from an API perspective, having the ability to have default values in the enums, it's huge, and it's going to improve a lot of scenarios that we deal with. But in the other way, just keep in mind that you can always do this, define a static let, and create a default or a predefined new case for this enum. And that works, and it's pretty nice. So just keep that you have all these tools in mind and pick the best one for the job. So that's it for today. A short video just discussing this new functionality of Swift 5.1 that it hasn't been discussed enough, probably because I don't think it was part of an evolution, because it's old and it's just like kind of like a compiler fix. But it's pretty cool. It's something that we have been waiting for really long, and I'm finally happy to have it here, and probably the compiler developers are also happy that they have this refactor already done and clean up. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.